Hi, friends. This is Cheryl from Tutoring with Cheryl and the Tech Coach for Tutors. And today I have another guest with me. I am meeting with Tina McMillan. She's going to introduce herself. And so, Tina, go ahead and take a second to introduce yourself.
Oh, hey, Cheryl. Nice to be back. I'm so glad that we're starting these little conferences that we're going to be offering. Yeah, my name is Tina McMillan from Canada. My company is called Atypical Tutors. So I work exclusively tutoring children that either have autism, have ADHD, or dyslexia. So they're also called neurodivergent. It's kind of the umbrella that they can all fit underneath. And typical students as well, because a lot of the strategies can be used for all different types of students. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we met, I believe, through Alignable. We started a conversation. Then you've already been a guest on the Tutoring with Cheryl podcast. And we decided that wouldn't it be kind of interesting if we just kind of had these maybe monthly chats about different topics. And I am a reading tutor, specifically doing reading intervention and support for struggling readers here in the United States. And I work on their literacy skills. So it's not just reading, but it's the writing, the whole gamut. And I agree with you. A lot of the things that you're using with your students help all students. And so our topic today is really going to be talking about parent-teacher conferences. And our spin is kind of like, what's the difference between Canadian conferences and conferences that happen here in the United States? I think we're going to find out that they're probably pretty similar, but there could be some differences. Here in the States, we call them parent-teacher conferences. What are they called there, Tina?
Basically the same, I guess, parent-teacher meetings, basically the same. Yeah, I would say the same.
Yeah. And as just before we push the record button, I was saying I've got a kind of a unique spin on that because I was, clearly a parent. Then I was also a classroom teacher preparing for all of those conferences over all those many, many years. And then now I take the spin of being the tutor and I can see all sides of it. And so when a parent comes to me and they say, we got this report about my child, we're concerned, I'm like, well, let's look at that report. And then I kind of look to see, what kind of a plan I can formulate to help that child move forward. But let's talk a little bit about the Canadian side of things, because if you're tuning into the Tutoring with Cheryl podcast, you're probably here in the States and you kind of know what they look like. You go in, you sit down, you visit with the teacher, you get 15 minutes and boom, you're out the door. So what does it look like in Canada, Tina?
Basically the same. The schools are built the same way. We have classrooms, tables, chairs, all that kind of thing. So basically the same. You have a specific time with the teacher. Usually doesn't seem like it's enough time because you have so much that you want to say and so many questions because, you ask your kid, what'd you learn today? Well, I don't know. The kids are the typical answer, right? So you really can't get much out of the kids. So the only person you can talk to is the teacher to get that insight. So yeah, they're basically the same. I think even the language is the same in terms of the neurodivergent kids that would have a program plan. So he's either called an IEP or an IPP or an ISP. So individualized program plan, individualized education plan, individualized specialized plan. Like they're basically the same. And it just means that they have a special plan that they need to either have through modifications or variations in the curriculum to help that child to understand everything better and have success.
Right. And I'm glad that you were using that specific terminology. And for the parent who has the child that doesn't have any of those specific letters or programs, what we want you to know is that not all children have specific plans to receive their services at school. Some children need more help. And then that's where we get into, maybe they're doing some modified lessons in the classroom or they're having some quick lessons right outside the door. In the United States, we would call that a 504 plan or student assistance team has met. They're going to create this plan of action. It'll be 6 weeks of intervention, heavy dose intervention, quick and very frequent, and hopefully that's going to solve the problem. But the older the student gets in school, the less likely that's probably going to solve that problem because that's probably been a problem for a long time. And so then those students start to transition into those IEPs and the other ones that you were mentioning. And here in the States, the teacher can recognize that a student might have a problem, but they do need to reach out to the parent to let them know. And they do need to say, hey, we're going to meet and we're going to brainstorm some ways that we can try to help your child. This is what the plan will be, and we will get back to you. So the parent is invited to those meetings if they can make it. If not, that's okay. We start that process anyway. Once that student assistance team has met and we feel either the goal has been met or the goal has not been met, you either say, okay, great, we'll just look to see if there's any more problems. If the goal hasn't been met, we can write out a specific 504 plan that isn't as maybe heavy duty as an IEP plan, but it is written by the team with parent involvement. And then that 504 plan follows that student. I should have double checked on if that's a yearly plan. I think that one is the yearly plan. And then if that doesn't actually solve the problem, then the child can qualify for some testing. And that is through the school's psychologist. And they just go through a battery of tests to determine what are the child's strengths, where are the areas that need to be, supported. And then you meet together for the MDT, which is the initial placement plan. And then you follow up with these yearly meetings for the IEP, the individual education program. And you talk about goals and whether or not they've met those goals. Now, I would like to hear how that is either the same or different in the Canadian schools. And then we can talk after you've explained, you gave some different letters than I used, ISP or whatever you had, which might be like our SAT and 504 plan. Go ahead and explain that so that the viewers kind of understand those letters and what that looks like for the child. And then we can get into, like if you're in a parent-teacher conference and you're hearing you have some questions or you're hearing things about your child's program, what could be some red flags or what could be things to look for. So let's address what that looks like in Canada, that progression of getting services.
It sounds very similar. Of course, we have provinces instead of states. Each province in Canada has their own criteria, their own policies, and their language. That's why I've seen like IEPs, which is individualized education plan for that student, ISPs, individualized specialized plan, and IPPs, individualized program plan. Seen different language because we have 10 provinces and 3 territories, so they tend to throw those things around, whatever works for them. Basically the same thing. So it's a program plan that is designed. Typically, a child wouldn't have these specialized acronyms for those plans unless they have a diagnosis of some kind. So either, like I said, autism before, I said ADHD, a combination thereof, dyslexia, or some sort of a learning delay, maybe even a speech delay. Maybe it's an occupational therapy issue. Maybe they have a physical disability that they need help with. Maybe they need some modifications for just getting around, for movement. It could just be that, not necessarily always an intellectual delay. So there's that too. So basically the same. Once that is created after they've been assessed by a psychologist, they would first get a referral to have that assessment done. And that's typically done through the child's pediatrician. So they would handle the referral aspect of that and have the child assessed. And if it is determined they do have a diagnosis, then a meeting is set up with the parents, with the teachers, and with any specialists that need to be on board as well to help that child. Like I said before, it could be a school psychologist, it could be a speech pathologist that already deals with the school with other students, an occupational therapist to handle more fine motor and body movements, and a physical therapist, more gross motor movements. Maybe there's something else going on there. So they would have a meeting with everyone involved and create a plan. Ultimately, at least they all have a plan, that they do have that in common. And then they decide what are the best steps to help that child. Where are the weaknesses? Where do they need more support? Where are they doing okay? And that is usually around this time of year, October, November. Especially if it's a new child with a new diagnosis, then that's going to come up. The teacher, like in your case, I'm sure you've had students where it's like, hey, noticing something, we might need to help this kiddo out with something. So let's kind of get this ball rolling. So then the meetings would happen. This is what we're seeing. And then the assessments could back that up. Okay, well, moving forward, what do we need to do? And even I was going to say too, if the child is old enough to understand and self-aware, sometimes they can be part of the IEP meetings or the plan meetings as well to kind of offer their input, because they can ask them, well, what do you think? What are you finding really tricky? What do you need help with? What are you finding? Because sometimes it's really great. You can ask the child themselves. We assume that we know everything, we know better, but sometimes the kids kind of know more than we do because they're the ones that are going through it.
Yes,
And
I
they,
agree with you. And our students typically were invited to come in as well. Most parents, I think sometimes parents are like, oh, I don't want my child to be a part of that process, but it is your child's plan, so they probably should be invited. Maybe they don't want to come, but it's always good to sit there. When you said that your referrals must come from a doctor, that is not the case here in the United States. So a teacher can do a referral, and parents can ask for testing. So if they see a pattern that's continued on, and that they have real concerns, they can actually go in and ask. And so I think that's something that maybe parents in the United States don't realize, that if your child has had the same problem year after year after year, and you're hearing these words of, oh, they'll outgrow it, oh, it'll get better, but it's not happening, then you have the right to go in to ask some more questions. But I would always encourage parents to start with the teacher, then
right.
move on to, maybe the guidance counselor, then maybe move on to the principal, or the school psychologist. There's an order, a way to do things. You don't just go call up the superintendent and say, hey, I need testing for my child. That's not the way it works. So you do have to start at the ground level. And I think that frustration sometimes for some parents is, in the United States, every year they start with a new teacher. And so if they're on that 504 plan, or on maybe they had that SAT plan, it has to start all over again every year. Whereas if you have a student who's qualified with an IEP, we just continually work with that IEP because the goal goes for 3 years. And so it can be slightly frustrating. But there are specific ways that a child would qualify for the IEP here in the States. And since I'm not the psychologist, I'm not going to go into all those details, but there has to be a difference between ability and their knowledge level, or we used, in old layman's terms, it was your IQ. I don't think they call it that anymore,
No,
but there's testing that they
right.
have to go through.
Right. We would compare their developmental level versus
Mhm.
their age level and see if there's any discrepancies. And I just wanted to add too, there are ways that parents can actually have their child assessed without going to the pediatrician, but the trick is it could be very costly if they don't have a referral. So they would have to pay out of pocket. So a lot of times it's better to get the referral, so then it doesn't cost the parents as much, because it could be $500 to $1,000
Oh my goodness
for an
gracious.
assessment. So
Yeah.
it can be very expensive here from our end. So
Okay. So, and here, the assessment is through the schools. And so it doesn't cost the parents a penny.
wow, that's great. I guess
Yeah.
here it depends on your own healthcare, because you can have private healthcare here, or you can have, every province has their own again. I'm in Alberta, so ours would be called Alberta Healthcare, and it only covers a certain percentage of things. So it doesn't cover a lot of the assessments that your child may need. So then you would have special healthcare plans through your work, and then they would cover that. And even in terms of tutoring, I know we're getting off topic a little bit, sorry. Some health plans even cover my services, tutoring. So
That is incredible. We do not have that here in the States. As a matter of fact, we just had a political election, and
yeah,
on my state's ballot, there was some funding. They wanted to give $10 million for I don't know if it was called school choice, but it was in like scholarship money for students. I didn't see that it went directly to tutoring, but that there would be choices for parents, and that didn't pass. So yeah, it's just really interesting. Every state does things a little bit differently here, but all states, to my knowledge, provide that testing through the school system. It comes from taxpayer dollars. Very interesting. Now, something else I was going to bring up is that our parents get a little booklet called the Parents' Bill of Rights. Do you get anything like that that you're aware of?
I hope we do. I've never seen one.
Okay, well,
but
see,
I hope we do.
I happen to know this just because I've been to countless IEPs in the years that I was a classroom teacher, but also because my son had an IEP for speech. And
Mhm.
he went through that whole process, the SAT process, the 504 process. Then he got his IEP. And it was very frustrating because I'm like, can't we just get this kid more help? And I mean, no intellectual problems whatsoever, graduated number one in his class, went to school, college for free because he got all taken care of through scholarships and things. But that parental rights booklet is important. And I sometimes think parents feel very overwhelmed when they leave those meetings because we set up all of these things that the child is going to go through and the teachers are going to follow, but you have rights. So if you're in the United States, make sure that you read that. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about those services. Now, when I'm thinking of a traditional parent-teacher conference, I'm thinking the parents come in, they sit down, the teacher provides this report, and as a teacher, I would try to sandwich the news. Okay, this is what your child's doing really well. These are the concerns I have. This is my plan to address it. I would encourage you to do this at home. Do you have any questions? I have 15 minutes to get through that information with the family. I go back to back. I could be doing, half of my students one day, half the other. I've already taught the first half of the day. Okay, so I've taught actually, I probably would have taught the entire day, then done 4 hours of conferencing, come back the next day and do the whole day of conferencing, trying to meet the needs of all the parents. We're exhausted. So sometimes we don't think we're just kind of disseminating the information. What are some things that you think parents should maybe be on the lookout? Like if they hear at a parent-teacher conference, or maybe parents have come to you with concerns that they've heard, oh, the teacher brought this up. Should I be worried? I can give you an example if you don't have one.
Go ahead. Yeah.
One of my examples would be if your child is, let's say, in second grade and your child is reading below grade level and the teacher says, oh, they're just not getting it yet, but they'll get it. They'll eventually get it. To me, that's a red flag. And the reason that's a red flag is, yes, they probably will get it, but when? Are they going to be a senior in high school when they finally get it? And are you going to listen to that and take steps to support your child with whatever that struggle is? So my question to the parents would be, did you ask a few more questions like, oh, how can I support the child? Or where specifically does my child need more help? And then if the teacher gives you a suggestion, are you going to do anything with that?
That's true. Exactly.
Sometimes you give them suggestions and you're like, there's no way that they followed through. I even followed up with a whole bunch of things. I sent it all home and I asked the child if they've been working on it. They've never seen it, So those are kind of those things that you sometimes scratch your head and go, what?
I know. Even as from a tutor's perspective, I work with the kids, one-on-one, a lot of families too, with both siblings kind of a thing. And the parent teachers reports are coming back now. And I have one student where, I guess, where am I going? I'm just trying to say that the teacher was pointing out abilities that the areas that the child could be improved in. But when I've worked with them, I've seen them excel in those areas. Whereas when the child was assessed in the classroom, the background information I found out from the parent was that, and from the child too, the child's old enough to say, that it was a very noisy room. They were very distracted. So I don't know if unfortunately, and it's not the fault of the teacher at all. It's just what it is, right? When they had the time to test, that was what happened. So the child tested poorly.
Right. And I think that is one of the difficult parts. If you've got a child who is neurodivergent or has some sort of a need, a lot of times, it could be a space issue. Like there's not enough space in the building. So the educator who came in to do the testing is forced to sit there. But sometimes I think if you want a really good perspective on what the child can do, remove all those distractions.
Yes, because this didn't happen in this case, and the student was very overwhelmed and does have a diagnosis, and that result should have been expected, really, unfortunately, because they weren't able to concentrate.
So I do have a question then for you. Like here in the States, we can say, at least in my state of Nebraska, and so I don't want to verify this for every state. So I will speak specifically to the state of Nebraska, that if a child has an accommodation that says you can get your testing in a different classroom or a quieter place, and they can be pulled, then I would ask the question, well, if that's on their IEP, how come that didn't happen? I don't know if that's an accommodation that you guys can provide, or if that's something that's on the list of accommodations. But I would always add that, like, if this child has a tendency to be distracted by the things going on around them, let's remove those distractions.
No, absolutely. And that can totally be included. Absolutely. There's no reason why it shouldn't. It also, unfortunately, the onus goes on to the parent to advocate for their child. And it's hard to anticipate all these situations. So it is best, for the child's sake, for the parents to be informed as much as they can about what is in their plan, and then they can contribute to the plan as well. They don't just have to say, okay, well, they told me I have to do this and this, but they know their child better than the teachers do. I would hope. And then they can make suggestions and say, well, this didn't really work for them because of this, this, and this, because this is, we've tried this at home, or we've tried this, because oftentimes the parents have tried many things and without success. And granted, sometimes they just need more consistency, which is tricky to do. Chances are that's not their only child. They have other children they have to look after as well. They don't just have that one focus, and they have a job, and they have life, and they have other things to do too. So there's only so much that they can do. And they're typically, I've not yet met a parent of any child that I've worked with that hasn't gone through a stressful period. It could be outside influences. It could be family. It could be anything. So we need to kind of step back sometimes and kind of like give them a break, or put yourself in their position, which I understand the teachers are stressed too. They have many, oftentimes too many students in their classroom to manage everybody. And there's probably more. I'm assuming there's more diagnoses than there was before. It seems to be increasing. So their attention is pulled lots of different directions as well. And then they have the curriculum they have to stick to. They have certain deadlines they have to meet as well. So it's really a complicated situation for everybody. And then the poor child is just like, I just want to have a friend. I just want to be happy. You know what I mean? When it comes down to it.
Yeah. Yes, I totally understand. I do want to apologize that my dogs are barking. Somebody has pulled onto the place with a piece of equipment, and they think they have a friend. So we're sorry about that, everybody. But let's staying back on track here. I do agree that there are going to be limitations for both the families and for the teachers, but I think that's why we have parent-teacher conferences. And I hope that when parents go to parent-teacher conferences, they feel empowered to ask questions. And then here's the other suggestion, that if you're at a parent-teacher conference and you're feeling rushed and you're feeling that time is running out, you may request more time. Maybe it can't happen that night. Or you can say, could we follow up with a phone call? Or could we do a virtual meeting or something, so that if this conversation needs to continue on, you don't want to just end it. Sometimes the teacher has to end it because there could be 20 other conferences afterwards. So they have to say, I'm really sorry. I have to wrap this up. Could I find a day and time that might work best for you? Or can I email you and send you a calendar link or something like that? And maybe we can meet again. So if you're feeling like you need more time, and this is for our parents, please request it. The other thing, I have some advice for parents, because I've been on the receiving end of some upset parents, and sometimes they're upset at the wrong person. Don't go into the parent-teacher conference angry. You might be feeling anger, but again, realize that your child was born many years ago. And if they've had this problem every single year, this might be the first time that this teacher's dealt with your child or your family, and they're just getting used to your child. So come in with some suggestions of things that will work for your child. Because if the teacher's saying, hey, we're having these problems, you can say, well, I know that this worked last year. Would you be interested in trying it? But likewise, if the teacher says, hey, we're having these problems, I have some suggestions of some things that you could maybe work on at home. If you'd have 10 minutes twice a week to do this, then put a sticky note up in the mirror in the bathroom or on your refrigerator or wherever, and say 10 minutes, Tuesday and Thursday nights, we're going to do this. And, working together as a team can really boost your child's confidence and their abilities in the classroom. And after all, that's what we want. We want our kids to be, we want them to feel confident. We want them to be proud of their accomplishments and have the tools that they need to do what they need to do to, be successful later on in life. I mean, that's the whole goal. That's the whole goal.
I have a question for you. I don't know what it is like there. I know it varies up here in Canada in terms of who can attend the parent teacher meetings. Sometimes they'll have like an aide or an assistant in the classroom that can be included in the meeting. Sometimes they're not. And oftentimes with the kiddos that I work with, the assistant or the aide is the one that directly works with that child, probably more than the teacher does, because they just don't have the time to do that. So are they included in the meetings that you guys have?
They are not. They are not contracted to come to those meetings, but I'm sure if the parent requested them to come and the principal said yes, they're hourly employees instead of salaried employees, so they don't typically go to those. I guess I would then say to the parent, if you'd like to have a conversation with that aide, let's meet before school, and hopefully you can come back when the aide is here. But to be really honest, our aides might be here in the States. They're not directly in charge of any kind of instruction, so they're just doing support work. So if the child has already been taught how to, let's say, read a passage and write about the passage, the aide is not doing the instruction. The aide is just helping them read the passage and monitoring them and encouraging them as they're writing that. So I think the way you guys train your teachers in Canada is also different than how we do it here in the States. So if you're going to be a teacher here in the States, almost 100% of the teachers go through Teachers College. There are some exceptions, okay? So you could do Teach for America, or you could get a undergraduate degree and then go get 2 years of special education training or whatever. But 90% of the teachers that I know of, 95, I'm just throwing out a ballpark number, most of the teachers, let's just say that, go through 4 years of training to become a teacher. So, and then many, I know many, probably 50% or more go on to get 2 more years. Most of them have a master's degree then in curriculum instruction. So the teachers here are highly trained. Our paras are not like that.
Gotcha. Right. Yeah, you call them paraprofessionals, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So, but the way your teachers are trained are different.
Right. Like they would specialize. Well, they would take specialize in education. They would go to university. Typically, university colleges are different. I know it's different in the States too. When we talk about a college, it's kind of more thought of like a trade school college, a vocational college. That's what we call it. Universities are more theoretical. So more like, you'd learn to be a medical doctor, you'd learn to be a teacher, you'd learn to be a lawyer, that kind of thing. But that would be a university.
Right. Yes. And that's probably really the same here too. So you can go to like a vocational college and get 2 years plumber, those types of trades. Or you can even go and become a respiratory therapist and get a 2-year degree at a trade school. But if you want to be a teacher, doctor, lawyer, nurse, whatever, nursing, you can start in a vocational school. But if you want the 4-year degree, you have to finish up at a teaching hospital, university, like the University of Nebraska Medical Center or something like that. So yes. And so, yeah, I think the educational practices are different, but I feel like we have more commonalities than we have differences. And the good news is that there's people out there like you and I that can help fill in the gaps for those kids that struggle. And so let's just kind of wrap it up with, again, just reminding people what you and I both do. Tina, go ahead and tell everybody again, one more time, what is your specialty? How do you meet the needs of your students? I will make sure that I link your information in the description. And as you share this out on your channel, I'm sure that you will do the same. So go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely. Yeah. So my company's Atypical Tutors. I'm a tutor that work with neurodivergent students. So typically kiddos that are on the spectrum with ADHD and dyslexia. I help with their academic tutoring. I help with the behavioral consultations as well, because they typically have lots of different communication goals, social skills goals that they need to work through. And then I can kind of lump them together. I also help with reading and writing, as you do, as well, because that's all kind of part of it. If they can't communicate effectively, then that adds to behavior. So they're all really linked together. So that's basically what I do.
Absolutely. And so I market myself as a reading literacy tutor. I work specifically with children in elementary grades. Most of my students are really between 2nd and 6th grade is kind of my sweet spot. I can work with students that are younger than that, but we really target the struggling reader. I mean, if you can't read, you can't do your math, you can't do your science, you can't do your social studies, you can't even read the directions on the board. So we want to make sure that our students can read and write and communicate. I've had lots of success, but I have to tell you, Tina, all of my students right now are on an IEP, whether it is for a specific learning disability or they're, have autism or whatever. So we have a lot of similarities with the students that we meet. Now you meet in person and I tutor online, but we're both there to fill in the gaps.
Absolutely. And even just a throwback to even going back to COVID, I find a lot of my students were kind of stuck in the COVID years. And so I'm all playing catch up and trying to fill in the gaps that were created at that point. And once we get past that, then they just do amazing. So it's just amazing to kind of go back to, I love having that ability to go in and fill in the blanks and figure out, okay, what did they miss? They were able to do this, this, and this, but they missed step number 2. Oh, okay, well, let's do step number 2. And then 3, 4, 5, and 6 are perfect. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I think we are just about out of time. I'm looking at the clock and I'm like, wow, that time went fast. That went really fast. I think we have shared so much great information, and we are going to be meeting again. I was going to pull up that sheet in the background, and just to kind of let the viewers know what we are going to be talking about. So give me 2 seconds to pull that up. Now, we might not actually follow the schedule, but the topics that we had were, we wanted to talk about stress around the holidays, talking about, for not just for the kids, but for the parents too, teachers too, dealing with conflict. We actually talked a lot about IEPs and with the parent-teacher conferences, but we can dive back into IEPs on another one. I think we really do need to talk about accommodations. That was another one of the topics that we had talked about, just those, what could you ask for an accommodation so that your child can get the work done? And knowing that not all students have that intellectual problem, sometimes it's that physical problem. So we'll be talking more about that. We are going to be talking about hidden talents of your child, how we can teach your child how to ask for help, working on social cues. Some of our kiddos don't quite get those social cues, talking about friends and making a friend and how that's really hard for some kids. And then that'll take us right into August, where we'll be talking about back to school and building vocabulary. And then there's probably more on the screen, but it's going off the screen. So I know that we've got a lot of things planned. And so I want to thank you, Tina, for coming to talk with me. We are going to take turns probably videotaping. I'm not sure, but right now I'm the owner of the video, so we'll both be sharing it out. And so I will be posting this on the Tutoring with Cheryl podcast. And I want to thank you very much for your time. And we will see you guys back here very soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I had such a great time. I really love talking to you. I think our listeners are going to learn at least one piece of amazing information that they didn't know before. So I'm glad that we're out there to help them, guide them through this process, and hopefully they'll send us questions too that we can add into future podcasts.
Absolutely. We do encourage you to leave those questions. So you guys, as usual, make it a great day and keep the learning going.